Rose Sukjin walked into that auction room planning to buy a quiet, forgettable bride, someone no one would ever look twice at. He got exactly what he asked for. But when he lifted that veil, the entire room went silent, and so did he. This story is going to take you somewhere you did not expect. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss a single word of what happens next. The marriage auction hall in Jeonju oozed like old money and newer regrets. Red lanterns hung from the ceiling in long, swaying rows. The wooden floor had been polished until it reflected every face in the room. Men in dark suits sat in curved rows like judges at a trial. Except the ones being judged were women standing on a raised platform behind thin white curtains, their faces hidden beneath heavy veils, their hands folded at their waists like they had been practicing patience their whole lives. Rose Sukjin sat in the very front row. He was 29 years old and ran the Jeonju underground with the kind of cold efficiency that made other crime bosses nervous. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply made decisions, and those decisions had a way of becoming reality before anyone had time to argue. His suit was dark navy. His watch was plain. The only thing about him that ever gave anything away were his eyes, which were the color of deep, still water and just as unreadable. He had not come here for love. He had come here because his grandmother, Rose Suni, had given him one condition before transferring the deed of the family compound to his name. He had to marry within the year. Not for romance. Not for warmth. Just marry. Produce an heir. Keep the Rowe bloodline moving. Sukjin had agreed without blinking. He had also made a private decision the moment he agreed. He would choose the woman no one else wanted. The plainest. The one the other bidders would overlook or laugh at. Because he did not need a wife who attracted attention. He needed a wife who would stay in the background of his life the way furniture stays in the background of a room. Present, useful, unnoticed. His second-in-command, a sharp-shouldered man named Baek Yu-sung, leaned over from the seat beside him and muttered, "You really going through with this, boss?" "I already paid the entry fee," Sukjin said. "That is not what I asked." Sukjin did not answer. The curtain at the front of the room parted, and the auction master, a round-faced man with a clipboard and too much confidence, stepped forward and clapped his hands twice. "Gentlemen, welcome. As always, our brides have been brought here voluntarily, their contracts reviewed, their families compensated. You will bid. The highest bidder wins the marriage contract. You have 60 seconds per bride. Let us begin." Sukjin leaned back in his chair and crossed one leg over the other. The first 4 brides were presented one after the other. Bidding went fast, enthusiastic voices, rising numbers, competitive energy filling the room like heat. These were women whose veils could not hide the straight lines of their posture, the expensive fabric of their dresses, the way they carried themselves like people who had been told their whole lives that they were worth something. Sukjin did not raise his paddle once. Baek Yu-sung watched him with growing confusion. The third one had a good family background. "Too visible," Sukjin said quietly. The fourth one, even more visible. Baek Yu-sung pressed his lips together and said nothing else. Then the 5th bride was let out. The room reacted, not with excitement, but with something closer to awkward silence. Even the auction master paused, just barely, before clearing his throat and reading from his clipboard. Bride number 5, age 24. Background, independent. No family connections to note. No prior contracts. Starting bid is low, gentlemen. This one comes at a fraction of the usual price. There was low murmuring. Someone in the back laughed, quickly covered with a cough. And Sukjin looked at her. She was shorter than the others. Her dress was plain white, the kind that had no decoration, no embroidery, no elegance attached to it. Her veil was thicker than the others, a heavy, layered fabric that hid not just her face but the shape of it entirely. She stood differently than the previous brides, not with practiced grace, but with the stillness of someone who had decided a long time ago that stillness was protection. Her hands, which were the only part of her fully visible, were steady. That was the first thing that caught his attention, and he could not explain why. No trembling, no fidgeting. Her fingers were simply still. The auction master repeated the starting bid. No one raised a paddle. 1 second passed. Then another. Sukjin raised his. The room turned. Several heads swiveled in his direction. Even the auction master blinked, rechecked his notes, then smiled quickly and moved forward. "We have an opening bid from Mr. Rowe." A pause. Any other bids? Nothing. Sukjin put his paddle down. Sold, the auction master said, and the word landed in the quiet room with the weight of something permanent. Baek Yu-sung turned to look at him with an expression that walked a very careful line between concern and disbelief. That one, Sukjin confirmed. She didn't even. Boss, we don't know anything about her. I know exactly what I need to know. What he meant was, she had no connections, no visibility, no reason for anyone to look at her. She was, by every measure the room had used to evaluate her, unremarkable. She was exactly what he needed. He did not know, could not have known, how badly he had just misread everything. The back room of the auction house was small and plain, with 2 chairs, a signing table, and a narrow window that let in gray afternoon light. The contract officer handed Sukjin a pen and slid 3 pages across the table. The bride sat in the chair on the opposite side, her veil still down. The contract officer addressed her directly. Bride number 5, you are required to confirm your agreement verbally before the contract is signed. She said, I agree. Her voice was a surprise. It was not soft. It was not shaky. It came out clean and level, with a particular texture, an accent that was not Korean, not fully, but that had been shaped by Korean syllables long enough that it had its own distinct sound. Sukjin's pen paused on the paper for just a fraction of a second. He signed. She signed. The contract officer stamped the pages, thanked them both, and left. They sat in the small room alone. Sukjin put the pen down. He looked at her. She was still sitting with that same quality of stillness, her veiled face turned slightly toward the window. You can take the veil off, he said. A pause. Not yet, she said. He tilted his head. The contract is signed. I know. She turned her face back toward him. I want to ask you something first. Something moved in the room. Not physically, just the atmosphere of it. Some subtle shift that Sukjin could not immediately name. Ask, he said. Why did you pick me? It was a direct question. No deflection, no preamble. He considered lying. It would have been easy, but something about the directness of the question made a lie feel like a waste of time. You were the one no one else wanted, he said. Silence. That is honest, she said. Yes. Then I will be honest too. She folded her hands on the table, those same steady hands. I chose to be in that auction room. I put myself in the position of bride number 5 deliberately. I knew exactly which kind of man would pick me. A pause. I needed a husband who would not look too closely. The air in the room changed again. Sukjin did not move. Why? Because I am trying to disappear, she said. And a man who wants an invisible wife is the perfect cover. Several thoughts moved through Sukjin's mind in rapid sequence, none of them comfortable. Take off the veil, he said, and this time it was not an invitation. She lifted her hands. She reached up slowly. She unclipped the veil at the top of her head, folded it back, and set it on the table between them. And Rose Sukjin, who had survived 14 years in the Jeonju underground, who had stared down men 3 times his size, who had not been genuinely surprised by anything in longer than he could remember, went completely, totally, utterly still. The woman sitting across from him was not plain. She was not forgettable. She had deep brown skin the color of the earth after rain, large dark eyes that were watching him with quiet, careful attention, and a face that had the kind of structure that artists spent years trying to get right. Her hair was pulled back tightly under a thin clip, but a few coils had escaped at her temples, and they caught the gray light from the window like small dark springs. She was, there was no other word for it, striking. The kind of striking that did not announce itself. The kind that crept up on you from the inside out, until you realized you had been looking for 30 seconds and had not said a single word. You, he started. Yes, she said, with the tired patience of someone who had heard many sentences begin that way. Why were you in the low bid section? He said. Why did no one? Because I told the auction house to put me there, she said. I bribed the coordinator to list me as plain, no family connections, low value. A pause. And because I am African, and in a room full of Korean men looking for Korean brides, no one looked closely enough to disagree. The words landed like stones. Sukjin sat with them. Then he said, very quietly, Who are you running from? She looked at him for a long moment. That, she said, is going to cost you more than a marriage contract to find out. Her name was Andy Boateng, and she was 24 years old, from a city in Côte d'Ivoire that she referred to only as the coast, and she had been in Korea for 3 years. She told him these 3 facts in the car on the way to the Row compound, and nothing else. Suk-jin did not push. He had spent enough years reading people to know the difference between someone who was hiding out of guilt and someone who was hiding out of necessity. Andy sat straight in the back seat, her veil folded neatly in her lap, watching the highway move past the window with eyes that were alert. Not the alert of someone sightseeing, but the alert of someone monitoring exits. He knew that kind of watchfulness. He practiced it himself. When they arrived at the compound, a wide, traditional-style building set back from the road by a long stone path lined with old pine trees. Baek Yusung was waiting at the entrance with 2 of Suk-jin's household staff. His eyes moved to Andy with the careful, measuring look of a man who ran security for a living and had questions. Suk-jin stepped out of the car first. "Prepare the east wing," he said to the staff, then to Yusung, "Private briefing." 1 hour. Yusung's expression said everything his mouth did not. Andy followed the staff inside without being told twice. She carried 1 bag. It was small, the kind of bag that said the person carrying it had learned not to be attached to things. In the briefing room, Yusung closed the door and turned. "Boss, she is not what I expected," Suk-jin said. "I noticed." Yusung crossed his arms. "She is also not Korean, which is going to raise questions from the families we do business with." And she looked at the compound's security layout when she walked in. She clocked every camera. Most people don't do that. Suk-jin sat down. "Run a background check." "Already started it in the car." A short silence. "What do you want me to look for specifically?" Yusung asked. "Whoever she is running from," Suk-jin said. Yusung nodded once. Then, "You froze, boss." "I was surprised." "You don't get surprised." "I did today." Suk-jin picked up his pen from the desk in the way he always did when a conversation was over. 1 hour. Yusung left. Andy was given a room in the east wing with a window that looked out over the back garden. There was a low wooden table, a wide floor cushion, a proper bed, spare but clean. The staff had set out tea and a small plate of food. She stood in the center of the room and took a slow breath. She had not eaten properly in 4 days. She had been sleeping in a rented room 2 towns over, changing her location every 24 hours, watching her money run down to its last edge. The plan: put herself in the auction, find a man who wanted invisible, get cover long enough to complete what she had come to Korea to do, had worked. Mostly, she had not planned for the man to be Roh Suk-jin. She sat down at the table and poured the tea with hands that were still, steady, because she had trained them to be steady a long time ago. She had looked him up, of course, before the auction. She had looked up every major bidder in the Jeonju circuit. Roh Suk-jin had the cleanest surface record of any underground figure she had encountered. Almost no paper trail, almost no public incidents, the kind of invisible authority that real power always preferred. She had chosen him because he was disciplined. She had not chosen him because she expected him to look at her the way he had looked at her in that back room. Not with heat, not with want, but with the slow, careful attention of someone recalculating a situation they thought they had already understood. That look bothered her. A knock at the door. "Come in," she said. It was a young woman from the household staff, small, with a quiet face. "Mr. Roh will see you at dinner. 7 o'clock. Main hall." "Thank you," Andy said. The girl hesitated. "Are you all right?" It was such a simple question. Andy looked at her. "Yes," she said. "I am fine." After the girl left, Andy reached into her bag and pulled out a small, flat object wrapped in cloth, the size of a thick book, but lighter. She held it for a moment, then tucked it carefully beneath the floor cushion. Whatever happened in this house, that stayed hidden. Dinner was quiet. The main hall had a long table that could seat 20, but only 2 places had been set, one at the head, one at the corner closest to it. A staff member served rice, broth, small dishes of vegetables and fish. Suk-jin arrived at exactly 7, sat down, and poured tea for himself and then, after a pause, for her. It was not a grand gesture. It was automatic, the way people pour for others when they have been raised to, and he seemed almost unaware of having done it. Andy noticed. They ate in silence for a while. Then he said, without looking up from his bowl, "You bowed to the staff." She looked at him. "Yes." The staff was surprised. "Is that unusual?" "For someone in your position, in this house, yes." She picked up her chopsticks again. I was not raised to think my position puts me above anyone. He looked at her then. Where were you raised? By a woman who worked very hard, Andy said, and who taught me that courtesy is not weakness. A pause. Your mother, he said. Something moved across her face, fast, there and gone. Yes. He had almost said something else. She could see it, the way his eyes shifted just slightly, the way he seemed to weigh something and then set it down. His background report on her had clearly come back with something. How much do you know? She asked. Enough to have more questions, he said. What do you want to know? He set his chopsticks down and looked at her directly. Your mother's name was Afua Boateng. She died 8 months ago in Abidjan under circumstances listed as an accident. You left the country 3 weeks after her death and have not returned. You came to Korea on a student visa, which expired 6 months ago. He paused. You are in this country illegally. The room was very quiet. And he said, he said slowly, the man who signed the accident report that cleared your mother's death as natural was a Korean national. His name was Lim Dae-hyuk. He is currently based in Jeonju. Everything in Andy's chest tightened. She kept her face still. You are very thorough, she said. I am very thorough, he agreed. And Lim Dae-hyuk is not someone you want to find alone. He has connections to 3 separate criminal networks across Southeast Asia. A pause. Including one that operates under my territory. Andy put down her cup. You did not know that, he said. It was not a question. No, she said. I did not. The silence stretched. You came here to confront him, Suk-jin said. I came here to prove what he did, she said. My mother did not have an accident. She was a witness to something. A transfer, a document exchange, something she was not supposed to see. And Lim Dae-hyuk, she stopped. Her voice had developed an edge she had not intended, and she pulled it back. He arranged what happened to her. I have been collecting evidence for 8 months. What kind of evidence? Enough. Her eyes met his. Enough to take to the right people. Suk-jin was quiet for a long time. The lanterns in the main hall cast low, warm light across the table between them. Outside, the garden was still. The object under your floor cushion, he said. Andy's stillness became something different. My staff noticed the shape when the room was prepared, he said. I told them to leave it. She stared at him. I told them to leave it, he repeated, because whatever you are carrying is yours. And you are, as of this afternoon, under the protection of this household. He picked up his chopsticks again. Lim Dae-hyuk is a problem that has been on my list for other reasons. It appears we have a shared interest. Andy felt something shift in her chest, something she could not immediately name. It was not relief exactly. It was more complicated than relief. You barely know me, she said. I know enough, he said simply, and went back to eating. She looked at him for a moment longer than she meant to. Then she picked up her chopsticks. And somewhere beneath the careful, practiced stillness she had worn like armor for 8 months, something, just a little, loosened. 3 weeks into the marriage, Andy learned 3 things about Ro Suk-jin that she had not expected. The first was that he read every morning before anything else, sitting in the inner courtyard on a low bench with a cup of black tea and a book held loosely in both hands, completely unreachable for that hour. The books were not what she expected. Not strategy, not law, not anything that fitted the image of a man who ran an underground empire. He read old literature, translated works from other countries. She had once seen a Senegalese novelist on that bench in his hands, the spine worn from being opened many times. The second was that he was funny, quietly, drilly, in ways that took her a moment to catch. He said things with a flat expression that landed several seconds later and had a way of making her exhale through her nose before she realized she was almost laughing. She found this deeply inconvenient. The third thing was that he never once, in 3 weeks, treated her like property. He had explained the arrangement to his grandmother over the phone the first evening. Andy had not been in the room, but she had heard the rise of the old woman's voice through the wall, and then the calm, unhurried sound of Suk-jin's responses, and eventually silence. He had come out of that room and said, simply, she wants to meet you next month. He had said it like it was a normal thing, like she was a person in his life and not a purchased solution. She kept waiting for the other side of him to appear. She had read the reports. She knew what he was. She had prepared herself for cold authority, for control, for the kind of man who bought people and arranged the world around his own comfort. And there were edges of that in him. She was not pretending otherwise. When he was in his office, the temperature of the house changed. People moved differently. Things got done without discussion. But he never brought that version of himself to dinner. At dinner, he asked her things. Not interrogation style, not rapid, pressured questions with nowhere to hide. He asked the way someone asks when they are actually listening. He asked about Côte d'Ivoire, about her mother, about the specific sound of the city she had grown up in, the market at dawn, the way the air tasted in the rainy season. She answered more than she meant to, every time. On the 22nd night, he asked, what did she look like? And he did not need to ask who he meant. Tall, she said after a moment. Taller than me. She had this laugh, loud, no apologies in it. She would laugh at her own jokes before the punchline. A pause. She used to say that life is too short for quiet laughing. Suk-jin was quiet. My mother died when I was 11, he said. He did not say it with performance. He said it the way you say a fact that has been in you long enough that it no longer tears, but still has weight. She was not loud. She was very still, like she was always listening for something. Andy looked at him. She sounds like the opposite of my mother, she said. Yes. A small pause. I think I spent a long time looking for her opposite. The sentence sat between them. Neither of them addressed it directly. But that night, for the first time since she had arrived, Andy lay awake for a different reason than fear. The investigation moved slowly, and then suddenly. Baek Yu-sung, who had moved through 3 stages of suspicion into something closer to cautious respect in his view of Andy, had been tracking Lim Dae-hyuk's movements for 2 weeks. On a Wednesday morning, he brought a folder to Suk-jin's office, and Andy was called in to sit at the briefing table. Lim Dae-hyuk moved money 3 times in the last month, Yu-sung said, spreading printed records across the table. Each time through a shell company registered in Jeju. The transfers connect back to a larger network. There is a buyer in Eastern Europe and a carrier chain through West Africa. He paused and glanced at Andy. The original point of the chain is Abidjan. Andy studied the papers. These match, she said quietly. The document I have, the one I've been carrying, it shows the beginning of this chain. My mother photographed the original transaction. She did not know what she was photographing at the time. She worked in a copy shop near the port. Someone used her shop to copy documents they should have destroyed. She kept 1 page by accident. Andy touched the edge of the paper. When she realized what it was, she went to the local authorities. 3 days later, Lim Dae-hyuk flew into Abidjan. Silence. That document is the origin of this entire chain, Yu-sung said slowly. It is not just evidence of your mother's murder. It is evidence of an operation that has been running for over a decade across 4 countries. Andy nodded. This is bigger than what you came here for, Suk-jin said. Yes, she said. He looked at her. You understood that. I understood it 3 months ago, she said. That is why I could not go to standard authorities. Anyone with the reach to suppress this for this long has people in standard authority. She paused. I needed someone outside the official system who had enough power to use it. Someone who had reason to move against Lim Dae-hyuk independently. Suk-jin leaned back in his chair slowly. You didn't choose me because you needed an invisible husband, he said. It was very quiet. And he met his eyes. I chose you because you had been looking for a reason to dismantle Lim Dae-hyuk's operation for 18 months. I read everything. I studied you. A pause. I chose you because you were exactly the right person for this. And because you would pick the bride no one wanted. Because you always choose the thing other people underestimate. The room was very still. Baek Yu-sung had gone absolutely motionless beside the table. Suk-jin's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. Something moved there that was not calculation. You used me, he said. Yes, she said. She did not look away. And you used me to get a wife who would stay invisible. We both made a calculation. A pause. But mine has been honest with you for longer than yours was honest with itself. A long silence. Then Suk-jin said, Leave us. Yu-sung gathered his papers and left without a word. Andy waited. You put yourself in tremendous danger, Suk-jin said, finally. Coming here alone with that document and no protection, no cover, no. I had a plan. Your plan depended on a stranger choosing you at an auction, he said, and his voice had something in it now. Not anger exactly, but something beneath anger. Something that sounded almost like fear for her. What if I had not bid? What if someone else had? What if? I had a secondary plan, she said. I had 3 levels of backup. That is not, he stopped. He pressed one hand flat against the table. You could have come to me directly. You would not have seen me, she said. I was a 24-year-old woman from Côte d'Ivoire with no connections, and an expired visa, and a photograph of a piece of paper. You would have had me removed from the building. He wanted to argue. She could see it. And then she saw the moment he chose not to, because she was right, and he knew it. We do this together now, he said. No more solo operations. No more information held back. She held his gaze. Then I need to know, she said, that when this is over, when Lim Dae-hyuk is finished and the chain is broken, you will let me go. Because I did not come here to be kept. The question landed between them like something fragile. Suk-jin looked at her for a long moment. That, he said slowly, will depend on what you want by then. And Andy, who had spent 8 months being absolutely certain of everything, found, for the first time, that she was not certain at all. It fell apart on a Thursday. Andy woke before dawn to the sound of movement in the corridor. Careful, deliberate movement, the kind that was trying not to be heard. She had been a light sleeper since her mother died. She was upright before the sound completed itself, feet on the floor, hand reaching under the cushion by instinct. The document was gone. Her heart did not race. It plunged. She was out of the room in seconds, moving down the east wing corridor in the dark. At the end of the corridor, she saw a figure slipping through the side door, slim, quick, familiar in a way that stopped her like a wall. It was Sua. Sua was 19 years old and had worked in the household for 8 months. She brought Andy tea every morning and had asked, once, if she was all right. She had a quiet face and careful hands, and Andy had, in a weak moment, thought of her with something like fondness. Sua, Andy said. The girl stopped. Her shoulders pulled tight. She turned, and in the faint light from the garden, Andy could see the expression on her face. Guilty, but not surprised. Like she had known this moment was coming. I am sorry, Sua said. Who sent you? A pause. He said he would hurt my brother. My brother owes money too. Who? Andy said again, very quietly. Lim Dae-hyuk, the girl whispered. The name hit the cold air between them. Andy calculated in 2 seconds flat. The document was in the girl's coat. She could see the shape of it. The side door led to the garden, which led to the outer wall, which led to the road. If Sua left with that document, the entire case collapsed. Her mother's death became an accident again. Lim Dae-hyuk walked. Give it to me, Andy said. Sua's hands trembled. He said he would hurt your brother, Andy said. And he will. Not because you failed, but because people like Lim Dae-hyuk hurt whoever is useful and then hurt them again when they are not. Giving him that document will not protect your brother. She stepped forward slowly. But I might be able to. Sua was crying now, silently, the way very frightened young people cry. Andy reached out, not for the document, but for the girl's hands. She held them for a moment. Give it to me, she said again, gently. Sua pulled the document from her coat and pressed it into Andy's hands. By morning, Suk-jin knew everything. He sat in his office with Yoo-sung and Andy and 3 other senior members of his operation, and his face had the quality it always had when things got serious. Like everything unnecessary had been cleared away, and what remained was pure decision. Lim knows we have the document, Yoo-sung said. He sent the girl as a test. He now knows it failed, which means he knows we know, which means he will move tonight. Move to do what? Someone asked. Eliminate the evidence, Suk-jin said. He did not look at Andy when he said it. She understood why. We have a window of approximately 12 hours to make this document unreachable, which means we cannot keep it here. Then where? Yoo-sung asked. Andy said, there is a journalist in Taejeon. Her name is Yoon Sul-ki. She has been investigating Lim Dae-hyuk's network independently for 2 years. She is not connected to any official institution. I have her contact. I have had it for months. If the document reaches her with the context needed to understand it, she can break the story in 48 hours. Everyone in the room looked at her. You have been carrying a backup plan this whole time, Suk-jin said. 3 levels, she said. I told you. A pause. Yoo-sung almost smiled. Almost. Make contact, Suk-jin said. We move at noon. Noon came and went with the controlled chaos of a plan working under pressure. Andy made contact with Yoon Sul-ki by encrypted message. Documents were scanned, copied, encrypted, and sent through 3 separate channels. The physical original was transported by Yusung personally in a vehicle that took a different route every 30 minutes. Andy stayed in the compound because Suk-jin asked her to. Lim Dae-hyuk has people watching the road, he said, before leaving with Yusung. You stay here. 3 of my best people are inside. Nothing will. I know, she said. He paused. There was a space between them, the kind that happens when 2 people have been circling something for weeks and can feel how close they are to falling in. When I come back, he said, we need to talk. I know, she said again. He left. Andy went to the inner courtyard and sat on the low bench where he read every morning. She picked up the book he had left there, the Senegalese novelist, same one she had noticed weeks ago. She opened it to the marked page. In the margin, in his handwriting, were 3 words in Korean. She could not read Korean fluently yet. She was learning, had been learning, which he knew, but she had learned enough of the alphabet to sound the words out slowly. She read them twice. She put the book down. She pressed her hands flat on her knees, and she sat very still, and she thought about her mother, who had laughed loudly with no apologies. She thought about 8 months of fear and running and the careful, exhausting work of keeping herself together. She thought about a man who poured tea for her without thinking, who read Senegalese novelists in his courtyard, who had looked at her across a contract table and gone completely still. She thought about what the 3 words in the margin said. You are remarkable. No date. No context. No explanation. Just there, in the margin of a page he had read many times. And Andy, who had been still for 8 months because stillness was survival, felt, for the first time, that the stillness was something else. The news broke at 9 that evening. Yoon Sul-ki's article went live across 3 major platforms simultaneously. The document, the transaction records, the chain, the names. Lim Dae-hyuk's name was at the center. The origin was Abidjan. The victim was Fu Aboteng, copy shop worker, mother, accidental witness. By 10, authorities in 2 countries had opened investigations. By 11, Lim Dae-hyuk was in custody. Suk-jin came back to the compound just after midnight. He walked into the inner courtyard and found Andy still sitting on the bench, the book in her lap, looking at the dark garden. He sat down beside her. Neither of them spoke for a while. It is done, he said. Yes, she said. A long pause. Yoon Sul-ki's article mentioned a source, he said. She described her as a woman of extraordinary persistence who crossed an ocean to keep a promise to her mother. Andy's throat tightened. She breathed through it. Your mother would be, he started. Don't, she said. Not sharply. Just quietly. I know she would. A pause. I just need a moment to sit with it before anyone tells me. He understood immediately. He went quiet. They sat together in the dark garden, the night pressing gently around the compound, the pine trees standing their long watch, the lanterns inside throwing soft pools of light through the paper doors. After a while, Andy said, You wrote something in your book. He was quiet for a second. You read it, he said. 3 times, she said. He looked at the garden. I wrote it 6 days after you arrived, he said. I did not intend for you to find it. When did you intend for me to find it? A pause. I do not know. Eventually. Another pause. Maybe never. She turned and looked at him. He turned and looked at her. They were close on the narrow bench, close enough that she could see the careful, stripped-down honesty in his face, the absence of the armor he wore in his office and with his people. He looked, in this moment, like someone who had not been seen clearly in a very long time and was not sure whether to stay still or step back. I told you, she said, that when this was over, I needed you to let me go. Yes, he said, and you said it would depend on what I wanted. Yes. She held his gaze. I don't know what I want yet, she said. I have been running for so long that I don't know what standing still looks like. Not the stillness I use to protect myself. I mean, real stillness. Choosing to stay. He nodded, slowly. Then stay, he said, until you know. A pause. And if you decide to leave, I will let you go. And if you decide to stay, he stopped. Something moved in his face. Then we will figure out what this is. Andy looked at him for a long time. That is a very reasonable thing to say, she said. I try, he said. And she laughed, soft and unexpected, the laugh escaping before she could calibrate it. And it sounded, even to her own ears, a little like her mother. No apologies in it. Suk-jin heard it, and something in his face, just for a moment, became completely unguarded. The night held them both in it. And everything that came next was not the end of the story, but it was, perhaps, the first real beginning of it. 3 months later, the compound was different. Not in its structure. The pine trees were the same, the paper doors, the low bench in the inner courtyard. But the quality of the air inside had changed the way a room changes when someone opens a window that has been closed for years. There was something in the flow of the days that had not been there before. A looseness, a warmth that moved through the household like a quiet current. Suha was still there. After the night of the document, Suk-jin had personally contacted the people Sua's brother owed money to, a quiet, efficient conversation that resulted in the debt being restructured in a way that was actually payable. He had not made a production of it. He had told Andy and then not mentioned it again. Suha had found out through her brother, and the morning after, she had knocked on Andy's door with a cup of tea and not said anything, just stood there with the cup and her eyes full. Andy had taken the cup. That was enough. Baek Yu-sung had become, in the careful way of men who express everything through practicality, something like a friend. He still called her the bride, occasionally, but it was different now. The way a nickname, given out of initial confusion, becomes a term of affection through sheer accumulated time. He had taken to consulting her on certain matters, particularly anything involving cross-cultural intelligence, because, as he once said with great reluctance, "You read situations better than people who have been doing this for 20 years. Andy had replied that growing up with limited resources develops different kinds of attention, and Yu-sung had written that down. She had seen him do it. Grandmother Rose Soon-hee had visited in the second month. This was the thing Andy had expected to be the hardest, and it was hard, but not in the way she had prepared for. Rose Soon-hee was 81 years old, had a spine that refused to curve despite the years, and wore expression like someone who had invented the concept of judgment. She had looked at Andy for a full 30 seconds without speaking when they first met in the main hall. Then she had said, in Korean, which Andy had been studying every day, which meant she understood about 70%. "You have the face of someone who has been through fire." Andy had answered, in her working Korean, with her still developing accent, "I have been. So I know what it looks like on other people too." Rose Soon-hee had made a sound. Not quite approving, not quite surprised, something between the two, and then sat down and demanded tea, and spent the next 2 hours asking Andy about Côte d'Ivoire with the relentless, specific curiosity of someone who had always wanted to know the world but had been kept in one place. Suk-jin had watched from across the room with an expression Andy had never seen on him before. She had catalogued it later, lying awake, turning it over. It was relief. Like watching two things he valued separately exist in the same space without breaking each other. The Lim Dae-hyuk case moved through official channels with the particular grinding slowness of international law, but it moved. Yoon Sul-ki's reporting won 2 awards in 3 months. The chain connecting Abidjan to Eastern Europe was formally documented. In the 4th week after the story broke, an official in Côte d'Ivoire contacted Andy through a government channel. Carefully worded, formally respectful, acknowledging the contribution her evidence had made to an ongoing national investigation. She had sat with that letter for a long time. Her mother had gone to the local authorities, frightened and trying to do the right thing, and had been ignored and then killed. And now, 8 months after her death, the thing she had accidentally witnessed was unraveling a decade-long criminal network across 4 countries. Andy had written back to the official. Then she had gone to the inner courtyard and sat on the bench and cried. Properly, for the first time since everything began, the kind of crying that does not care about stillness or protection or the armor you have worn for 8 months solid. She cried until she was empty of the particular weight she had been carrying, and then she sat in the afternoon light and felt, beneath the emptiness, something she recognized as ground. Suk-jin did not try to find her. He waited. When she came back inside, there was fresh tea on the main hall table. He was in his office. She went to the door and knocked. "Come in," he said. She stepped inside. He looked up from his desk. "I am done running," she said. A pause. "I know," he said. "I want to figure out what this is," she said. "What you said, about figuring it out together." He put his pen down. "Yes," he said. "It will not be simple," she said. "I am from Côte d'Ivoire. You run an underground empire in Jeonju. Your grandmother is terrifying. I am still learning Korean. And we started with a transaction." She held his gaze. "There is a long way between where we started and anywhere real. Yes, he said again. And you are not an easy person, she said. You are controlled and you close off and you express things by leaving tea on tables instead of using your words like a person. Something moved in his face. That is fair. I am not easy either, she said. I planned you. I researched you and put myself in that auction room and chose you specifically because you were useful. That was cold. It was strategic, he said. It was cold and strategic, she said. And then I started eating dinner with you, and the strategy got. She stopped. Complicated. Complicated, he repeated, and there was something in the way he said it. Quiet. Careful, not quite concealing the thing underneath. Yes, she said. He stood up from behind the desk. He walked around it and stood in front of her, close enough that she could see the exact expression in his eyes, the one that had no armor in it, the one that had been appearing more and more in the last 3 months when it was just the two of them. I picked you, he said, because I wanted someone invisible. I got the opposite. A pause. I have been failing to be sorry about that for 12 weeks. Andy looked at him. 12 weeks, she said. 12 weeks and 3 days, he said, without inflection, and that was the dry flatness of him. The thing that landed 3 seconds later and had her exhaling through her nose before she could stop it. She almost laughed. He watched her almost laugh with the expression of someone who had been practicing the specific restraint required to not smile at that sound. Rose Sukjin, she said. Andy Botingro, he said. She stopped. I never took your name. No, he agreed. But grandmother asked me what it would sound like, and I told her. She said it was a good sound. The word hit her somewhere she was not defended against. Botingro. Her mother's name. His family's name. Pressed together. She said that. Andy said. Verbatim. A pause. She also said, and I am translating as accurately as I can. That girl has the kind of spine that takes 3 generations to grow. Do not be an idiot about this. Andy stood very still. Then she said, your grandmother is my favorite person in your life. She already knows, he said. She told me not to tell you because she did not want you getting arrogant about it. And Andy laughed. The real, loud, no apologies laugh. The one she had been carrying in her chest since the night in the courtyard when it first escaped. And Sukjin stood there and watched it happen with his face completely open, every careful layer of him pulled back, and what was underneath was simply glad. Glad in the quiet, specific way of someone who had spent a long time not expecting anything and had been wrong. I am staying, Andy said, when the laugh had settled. I know, he said, and we are figuring this out. Yes. And it will be messy and strange, and there will be problems we cannot predict. Yes. She looked at him. And you are not going to turn into an easy person overnight. No, he said, and neither are you. She considered that. Fair, she said. He did something she had not seen him do before. Something small, careful, like he was not entirely sure of it. He held out his hand. Not dramatically, not with any great speech attached to it. Just held it out, palm up, between them in his office in the mid-afternoon light. Andy looked at his hand. She thought about her mother, tall, loud laughing, brave in the specific way of people who cannot afford to be otherwise. She thought about 8 months of running. She thought about the auction room, the back room, the dinner table, the bench in the courtyard, the book with 3 words in the margin. She put her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, not tight, not urgent. Just there, present. A decision made and not taken back. Outside, the pine trees were doing what pine trees do in late afternoon, holding light, releasing it, catching it again. The garden was still. The compound was quiet in the particular way it had been getting quiet lately. Not empty quiet, but full quiet, the kind that happens when people stop bracing for the next thing. What do we do now, she asked. He thought about it, genuinely thought. She could see him doing it. Dinner, he said. And then tomorrow. She nodded. And the day after that, she said. Yes, he said. And the day after that. They stood there. A Korean Mafia boss from Jeonju and a woman from the coast of Côte d'Ivoire who had crossed an ocean, survived betrayal, dismantled a criminal network, and refused, at every point, to be underestimated. And they held on. Not to rescue each other. Not to fix each other. Not because they had run out of other options. But because at the end of all the running and all the planning and all the careful survival, the most radical thing either of them had done, the most unexpected, unpredicted, never saw it coming thing, was this. They chose. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. You just made it to the end of a story that started with a veil and ended with a choice, and every twist along the way was only the beginning. Subscribe to this channel right now, because the next story is already waiting, and it will take everything you think you know and start over.